Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Rivkah wishing you all Chodesh Tov, a very good month of Kislev, here in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the first day, Rosh Chodesh, of the month of Kislev, 5781, November 17th, 2020. This coming Shabbat, we are reading parashat Toldot. Toldot, we'll be talking about it in a minute. It begins on Genesis chapter 25, verse 19, and these are the generations, Toldot, of Isaac, Yitzhak, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Yitzhak. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. I'm just first going to mention once again, it is Rosh Chodesh, Kislev. Kislev is the month of Chanukah, of course. Chanukah, which begins on the 25th of Kislev. Kislev is also known as the month of dreams. And not for naught, all the dreams that we read about in the book of Genesis, the dream of Yaakov, the dreams of Yosef, and the dreams of Pharaoh, they all are read during the month of Kislev. They're in the upcoming parashat, the upcoming Torah readings, and of course every Shabbat we advance to a new section of Torah. We begin with Bereshit, Genesis, which we began just 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago. Simchat Torah, and every week we proceed. And so over the next 4 weeks, we'll be reading the parashat, all the readings that have the dreams of Yaakov, the dreams of Yosef, and the dreams of Pharaoh. And they're very powerful dreams. And there's a stronger connection, of course, between Kislev and dreams. And of course, being that Kislev occurs around the time of the winter solstice, the days are shortest and the nights are longest, a good time for dreaming. And Jewish tradition takes dreaming very seriously. We're to be cognizant of our dreams if we can, and we're to value them. They're teaching us something. There are prayers for hatavat chalom. There are prayers for hatavat chalom, for making good a dream. If you have a dream that troubles you, there's a process. There's a prayer and there's a process for turning that dream to a positive sign. Anyway, dreams are very serious, and it's very important that we try to find the good in our dream, because how we interpret our dream, as we'll see with the story of Yosef, how he interprets dreams, that to a great extent influences how the dreams play out. So it's very important if someone tells you a dream, and it might not seem to be a positive dream, to encourage them by finding the good in it, because by finding the good in it, you will be finding the good in it, and that can make all the difference. We are about to begin the story of Yitzhak, right? Toldot. That's this week's Torah reading. Begins in Genesis 25:19, concludes Genesis 28:9, and it opens like this. I'll read it once more in Hebrew. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzhak ben Avraham, Avraham olid et Yitzhak. And these are the offspring of Yitzhak, the son of Avraham. Avraham begot Yitzhak. So the first thing that the Torah tells us in accounting or recounting these Toldot, this history, the history of Yitzhak is going to be the birth of his two sons. So that obviously after the Akedah, after the binding, that Yitzhak underwent. This is, and of course the marrying Rivka, which we read about in last week's parashat. This is the next great event in Yitzhak's life, the upcoming birth of his two children. You know, Yitzhak, his story is being told here. Up till now it's been about Avraham, but really it's been a lot about Yitzhak as well, because the story of Avraham involved the birth of Yitzhak, the promise in the birth of Yitzhak. The story of Avraham involved the Akedah, which could be argued that Yitzhak was the real hero of the story of the binding of Yitzhak. And then, of course, even though Yitzhak is passive in finding for him a bride, the closing, some of the nearer to closing verses of last week's parsha, Hayis Sarah, the life of Sarah, is a beautiful moment when Rivka and Yitzhak meet one another, and how she is able to comfort him, and how it mentions that he loved her. It's not mentioned. I don't think that is mentioned concerning the other patriarchs and matriarchs. You can double check me on this, but I don't think it's mentioned. It says when they meet that Yitzhak loved her. And that's very powerful. And in fact, of the three patriarchs, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Yitzhak and Rivka are the only monogamous couple. There was no other. There was not Hagar. There was not Rachel and Leah and the two handmaidens. It was just Yitzhak and Rivka. They prayed together. We read about that right away. That was the first thing they did together, it would seem. Well, I guess the second thing, they prayed for a child. They prayed together. And they each, however, had a very different understanding of the two sons that were born to them. And we'll talk about that, but in the conclusion, or the post-conclusion of that whole question of which son was going to be worthy of the blessing and worthy of carrying on a tradition, at that conclusion, when Rivka tells Yitzhak that their son has to leave, Yaakov has to leave to find a bride, and she's really sending him away because she's afraid for his life. And Yitzhak accepts it. She deceived Yitzhak. With the whole deception with her and Yaakov and disguising him as Esau, which takes place in this week's parsha. She deceived him, and then she told a little white lie, I guess, by saying that she just wanted Yaakov to leave. She didn't want him to marry one of the local women like his brother Esau did. But what did Yitzhak see in Esau, and what did Rivka see in Yaakov? Esau, we are told, was born hairy. He was the firstborn. He came out first, and Yaakov was holding on to his ankle, Akiv, which is why Yaakov has the name Yaakov, because he held onto his brother's ankle. And Esau was hairy. And the word Esau, in Hebrew, ayin sin vav, is the root of the word meaning to make, to do, to be made of. And so the Torah is telling us that Esau has all the makings for success. And Yitzhak saw this. He saw that there were going to be challenges, and perhaps someone like Esau, who was a man of the field, he was a hunter, he went out and he could take care of himself. He's a protector. And Yitzchak has to hand down the promise, right? The covenant between Abraham has become the covenant between Abraham and God has become the covenant between Yitzchak and God, and will become the covenant between his children and God. But who will he give the covenant to? So he thinks of Esau as someone who excels in the sphere of this world, the physical world. And that's a very significant aspect of our existence, and we need to survive in this world, and hopefully to thrive spiritually. But Yitzhak saw Esau as being someone who could cope with this world. He had that physicality. He was Esau. He was Asui. He came out built. He came out already prefabricated. Whereas Yaakov, he was halak. He was smooth. He came out unformed in a way. He was total potential, and Rivka saw this, and she shaped him to be a righteous person. And she saw the potential. With Yaakov, it was all potential. With Esau, it was all, how can we say, the fulfillment. I mean, there was no potential. There was not going to be any growth. He was as he would be. He wasn't going anywhere. And so he had these qualities which Yitzchak felt were very favorable qualities for the well-being of his descendants. So he favored Esau. Rivka, like I said, we've already seen Rivka from the very beginning when we see her initiative, we see her goodness, her kindness, how she treated a stranger, how she labored on his behalf. It wasn't easy what she did. And she gave him water to drink, and she gave his camels water to drink. And we also see that she invites him into the house and says, we have a place for you to sleep and we have food for your camels. She had tremendous qualities of goodness. And then we also see after Eliezer, after Abraham's servant arrives at the house of Bethuel, the father of Rivka, and is welcomed, and they have a meal, and he tells the entire story to them of how he met and knew that Rivka was the right one for his master's son, Yitzchak. So when at the conclusion of his visit, he wanted to leave, and they say, no, stay for a few weeks, few months, stay for a year. And he said, I can't stay. I have to get back as soon as possible. I was given a commandment to fulfill. I was given a mitzvah. I can't delay. I have to fulfill it. I have to be mezarez. I have to accomplish this as soon as possible. It's too much on the line here. It's too important. And so they said, okay, we'll ask the girl. So they asked Rivka, do you want to go? Do you want to stay? And she said, I'm going. And when she said, I'm going, basically, she was saying what Abraham said when God said, Lech lecha, go out of your homeland, go out of your family, go out of your surroundings, go out of everything that's familiar, and go to where I'm telling you. I'm going to show you. And she basically made the same statement. She gave up everything that she had, her family, her surroundings, and went with the servant of Abraham to Canaan to meet Yitzhak. So this is a woman of tremendous caliber. I don't think any of the other matriarchs are described in such terms. Again, you can check. You can check. It's just she is described, her qualities are described in great detail. And like Sarah, she was very beautiful. And how do we learn that? In a similar situation. When Yitzhak went, there was a famine, and he went south toward Gerar, the land of Gerar. And on the way there, God said to him, don't leave the country. In case you were thinking, like your father Abraham, when there was a famine, he went into Egypt. I'm telling you, don't leave. Don't leave the country. Don't leave Eretz Yisrael. Don't leave the land of Israel. It'll be okay. And then he had this incident where he was living in the land of Gerar, where Avimelech was the king, and he told everybody that Rivka was his sister. It's just like his father Avraham concerning Sarah. He was afraid that people don't fear God in this place. And someone might think he's married to Rivka and kill him to take Rivka. So he tells everyone she's his sister. And then we're told that Avimelech, we're reading here from Genesis chapter 26. I'll start with verse 6. So Yitzhak settled in Gerar. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, she is my sister, for he was afraid to say my wife, lest the men of the place kill me because of Rivka, for she is fair to look upon. And it came to pass, as his days there lengthened, that Avimelech, king of the Philistines, gazed down through the window and saw, behold, Yitzhak was jesting with his wife Rivka. Avimelech summoned Yitzhak and said, but look, she is your wife. How could you say she is my sister? So Avimelech is looking out the window and he sees Yitzhak and Rivka being intimate, and he sees the love there. It's unmistakable. He realizes this is not brother and sister. He calls him in. He says, why'd you tell me that? Now, we know why he told him, but my point in bringing this up is that Sarah had this same incident occur to Sarah 2 times. And each time she was actually taken by the person who pursued her, who was then prevented from carrying out his designs because God intervened. In this case, it didn't even happen. I mean, their bond, the bond between Yitzhak and Rivka was unbreakable. And Avimelech saw that. And he said, this is, he had to get to the bottom of it. So before we begin to talk about Yaakov and Esau, I just think it's very important to really understand who their parents are. Yitzhak is oftentimes seems to be, he's the middle child generationally. He's kind of sandwiched in between Avraham, who's wow, and Yaakov, who's very wow, and Yitzhak, he's kind of passive. I say that with quotes. And he was tested in ways that we have never, and hopefully will never be tested in. On the other hand, he was born in the land of Israel, and he never left the land of Israel. He didn't have trials and tribulations with his wives. He had one wife. He didn't seem to have trials and tribulations with his children as they were growing up. His only sorrow was when he discovered that he had been deceived by Yaakov and his son Esau was crushed. He had a twinge of pain, but he ended up blessing both his sons. So, maybe Rivka and Yitzhak had a lot going for them, and there just wasn't that much to report. So Torah seems to almost slide right over them, because as soon as we are told these are the generations of Yitzhak, and these are his sons, and then it's all about Yaakov and Esau, except for these other stories. There are stories, of course, we learn about Yitzhak. He was very successful. He had tremendous flocks and herds, and so he took up a lot of space, which is why he had to keep moving and be digging wells and he reopened the wells that his father had dug. He needed wells, for physical well-being and for spiritual well-being. Well is also a be'er. The Hebrew word be'er has the letters Beit Aleph Resh, which means ba'or, in light. They're a be'er, they're a mava'er, they make light. So a well, in a physical sense, is a wellspring of water, and in a spiritual sense, it's a wellspring of light. And Yitzhak his servants were digging wells, and he was prosperous, very prosperous, and he had these two sons. And early on, we see that Esau came in from the field. He was tired, and he was hungry, and he said to his brother, Yaakov, make me something to eat. I'm hungry. Okay, here it is. Chapter 25, verse 20. Verse 29. Yaakov simmered a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. Esau said to Yaakov, pour unto me now some of that very red stuff, for I am exhausted. He therefore called his name Edom. Yaakov said, sell as this day your birthright to me. And Esau looked, and Esau said, look, I am going to die, so of what use to me is a birthright? Okay. So here you got that active guy who was born fully developed, coming in from the field. He's exhausted because he has been measuring up to the challenges of the field. And he comes into the tent where the tent dweller is, Yaakov. Yaakov's making porridge. He's making stew. And Esau sees it and wants it. He's hungry. And Yaakov sells it to him for the birthright. And, of course, the real giveaway here, and it's interesting, Esau didn't fight him over this, right? Later on, he got mad. The second time it happened, but the first time, he was frustrated by it. But he didn't see any value in it. And he said it very clearly, I'm going to die. And basically, he was saying there's going to be no continuation of him. Why should he have the birthright when he's not going to be the father of successive generations of righteous people? He's going to die spiritually. He's not going to have anything to give for the next generation. It's not going to last. So he saw that. And as soon as he ate to his fill, he got up, arose and left, and Esau despised the birthright. He ate, he drank, he got up and went. Not even a thank you. Nor was there a protest. Okay, what do I need it for? Second time around, he protested. He actually didn't confront Yaakov about it, but he protested to his father. And then, of course, swore that he was going to kill his brother as soon as his father dies. Which, of course, when they ultimately did meet, they hugged, they kissed. There's some different interpretations as to the sincerity of Esau, whether he had truly forgiven and forgotten, or I should say forgiven his brother, or come to terms with the fact that it really was never meant for him, and that it all turned out for the best. He understood at the very beginning that the birthright really belonged to Yaakov. And so maybe now at the end, he understands as well. But in any case, he didn't kill his brother. He didn't mention it. He didn't bring it up. It was a bygone, as it were. So ultimately, he never did confront Yaakov directly about having, in his eyes, being robbed of his birthright twice. Only to his father did he make the complaint. And of course, by making the threat, he compelled Rivka to send Yaakov to Haran, where he was going to meet Rivka and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah and Lavan. So basically, in a way, Esau also gave Yaakov his blessing, his blessing for the journey, because he compelled him to leave, and that he had to do that. And not only did Yaakov have to do that in order to escape Esau and in order to meet his wives, but he had to do that because he had to learn how to cope with that world. Now that he had actually wrested the blessing from Esau, and it was fully his, the birthright and the blessing, now he had to learn how to take care of it and fend for himself. He had the spiritual he had the spiritual wherewithal. He had to now also acclimate himself to this world and deal with people like Lavan, and deal with jealous sisters, and deal with difficult situations, and lift huge rocks off of wells and have amazing dreams. This is just the beginning of his journey. But he didn't step out of that tent until he had for himself both the birthright and the blessing. And the fact of the matter is that the two sons were twins. And Esau came out first, and Yaakov was clutching to his ankle. Meaning, there's the old Abbott and Costello routine, who's on first? If you don't know it, check it out on YouTube. It's quite funny. And here it's sort of who's first. They had to fight it out. And Yaakov won. He really won 3 times, 3 strikes. He won by purchasing the birthright, by selling porridge to Esau. He won a second time by receiving the blessing of Yaakov, by dressing as Esau according to his mother's instructions. His mother, who said, "Don't worry, if your curse is on me. Anything that bad happens, it's on me." And she had to live without her son, her beloved son, for the next 20-some years. So she paid a price. But Yaakov had to learn how to fend for himself, and he did. And that's what that experience was. That's what all those years in Haran, all those years living with his father-in-law. It was a testing time. And when he finally returns after all that, the first person he has to confront is Esau, who was the master of that world. And you know what? Yaakov takes all sorts of precautions before meeting Esau. But in the end, when they confront one another, they confront as equals. Esau recognized again, for the 3rd time, he recognized that Yaakov had what it takes. He had acquired for himself the abilities to fend for himself in this world. And unlike Esau, he wasn't pulled into the extreme. I mean, Esau did some not nice things in his life. His ability, his strength also proved to be his weakness, because it pulled him further than he should have gone into this world, into the physical world. But he certainly understood what it takes to carry the birthright and to be able to ensure that your next generation and the generation after that are going to be true to your truth. And so again, Esau that last time said, you've made it, you've accomplished it. Now I'm going to go my way. And, it's all going to be good. So I just wrapped up in a real nutshell this week's parsha, next week's parsha, and I think the one after that as well. So, but I wanted to describe the trajectory, really, and the storyline of what's happening here, the development of this nation, this people. And each of the three patriarchs adds to the equation their own qualities, their own attributes. Avraham is always associated, especially with the attribute of chesed, of loving kindness, of giving, of inviting guests into his tent, of sitting outside in the heat of the day, 3 days after his circumcision, waiting to welcome guests into his house, of teaching, of bringing people together, of making peace. He was a man of chesed, very outgoing, embracing. Yitzhak is associated with gvura, which is restriction, which is much more introverted and introspective, and again, outwardly might seem passive, but it's a different energy than the like when you breathe in, you breathe out. Each aspect of that breath is crucial and vital, and each of those two processes, breathing in and out, are one is as amazing as the other. But Gevurah is more the breathing in than the breathing out. It's the taking back in. And so we see that with Yitzhak. Those are his qualities. He didn't talk much. He didn't talk much. He wasn't, again, with the exception of the Akedah, which he wasn't called to, his father was, he wasn't called to these type of tests. So he had a different relationship. Gvura has a different relationship with man than chesed. And then, of course, Yaakov is considered to be the synthesis. He brings in both. Again, like he brought in the spiritual and was able to blend it with the physical in order to stake out a claim in this world, to create a to fill this world with the spirituality, with the knowledge of Hashem, that's what we mean when we say spirituality. And that's why Yaakov had to perfect himself in both the spiritual world and the physical aspect of the world. They're two different faces of the same world, the spiritual and the physical. And so Yaakov, he needed to stake out a claim for his people, for the future, for Hashem, because ultimately those qualities that Yaakov was able to perfect became the qualities necessary for making in this world a place where God can dwell amongst us. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for being with me, Temple Talk.